Our next speaker is an amazing man and someone who I love very, very much, a wonderful, nurturing soul, Dr. John Ryan. John is a medical doctor, he is a teacher, he's a speaker, and he is an incredible healer. He has written some cutting-edge books that are so, so important for our time. And to one of the kindest people in the world, an Earthkeeper, round of applause for the amazing John Ryan. Thank you. You need this?
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Are we working here? Testing, testing? Yeah. Okay, good. So thank you very much, James. It's always exciting to be here at this particular conference. I speak at many different events and different kinds of events, but I have to say that some of the most profound personal experiences that I have lived have occurred during these Earthkeeper gatherings, and particularly here in Arkansas. I've had several, we'll go into shortly, some visions and different things I had that were formative in helping me develop the healing work I do with quantum DNA. And the information that I received to be able to do that work came while attending these events here in the Arkansas vortex. So we're in an incredible place. So thank you, James, for organizing the event and for holding it here. The energy of this place is very, very special for many reasons, and I know you're all aware of the fact that we're on a quartz mountain here, where it's a really vast quartz field, and it holds a very powerful catalytic energy. But the other important element of the equation in that is we gather together. And when we gather together as energy beings, we're bringing our energy field into this place, our Merkaba, if you will. So every one of us has this massive field of energy that's part of our spiritual energy structure. And when we gather together in person, physically, in a place that has the kind of energy that can catalyze spiritual transformation the way a place like this can, we're really doing incredible things, both for our own personal healing and our own personal evolution or ascension, but also integrating new energy and new information into the grid of the emerging Earth. So it can't be overstated how important this type of a gathering is, because we're doing incredible spiritual work and we're receiving incredible spiritual gifts all at the same time. So we're going to cover lots of things today, and I'm going to very quickly go through an aspect of this talk which I sometimes go into a little more deeply, but I know you guys are very energy savvy. You've worked with energy in many, many different ways, but some people are newer to energy than others. So I'm going to take a few minutes just briefly to go through a quick synopsis of understanding the foundation of energy medicine. But then we're going to jump into the quantum work with DNA, the unity field healing work that I do. And we're going to talk about a new and emerging aspect of this work called the work in this past year, in March of this year, I received in a meditation a visitation from a group of light beings who referred to themselves as the Sirian Blue White Collective. Now, you have to remember I'm a medical doctor. So already working with quantum energy and DNA and all this kind of stuff, the DNA part is not so foreign to me, and working with energy is certainly not foreign to me. But when I started to receive visions that were teaching me to work in the quantum field of energy, that was already a big step for me to take. I had to really step out of my box of 3D thinking and scientific thinking and be very open-minded to receive that type of support. But when the Syrians came as a group of light beings and told me that they're the light beings behind this work, and they're actually with us when we're doing the work, was another level of integration that I personally had to go through. And then they told me in the next sentence, and you're going to begin to do transmissions. And I thought, oh, right. You're going to push me completely out of my comfort box to do this. But they said transmissions are gatherings. They're a gathering of beings who will come together, who will be drawn for one reason or another to the event. And you'll do a guided meditation process in which we will intercede ourselves. We'll come into the space, we'll come into the room with all of you, and we'll do direct transmissions with each individual that's present in the space. So in the hour and 15 minutes we have together, I'm going to talk super fast because I'm going to use the last 15 minutes to do a transmission. So we're going to do one together today. Does that sound good? All right. So quickly, with energy, we're going to cover these concepts. Everything in life is energy. This room full of people is not at all surprised to hear that. I know that. Everything we see, whether it appears physical or not, whether it's mental or emotional in its nature, is actually constructed of energy. And everything that exists on the planet is founded in energy in some way. In the human form, the way we do this is we take on particles that are composed of energetic particles. So for example, in a physical structure, everything we see is made of atoms. And atoms are essentially protons, neutrons, and electrons, which form together in a structure to create the potential for an existing particle. And the particle can be more of a wave or energy, or it can be more of a particle, i.e. matter. So things that are solid can flux in and out of energy probabilities. We'll talk about quantum science in a minute and explain that statement a little further. Atoms give rise to elements. They form things like carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, so on and so forth. And so all of these elements, I know you've all memorized the periodic table and you can recite it, right? They form certain kinds of substrates that we use to build things in physical form. So carbon and hydrogen, oxygen, it's all part of our body. It's all part of everything you see around you, even the carpet, the chair, the screen, everything. So these particles are founded on electrons, and electrons are really particles of energy. So everything that's physical comes from energy structure. And you, in your body, are an energy being. Now, we normally think of energy and matter as separate entities. It's either form or energy. But I'd like to erase the wall that exists between those two concepts, because everything that's material is energy. Your very first energy body is actually your physical body. It is energy itself. And then we have other bodies. We have an etheric body, we have an emotional body, we have a mental body, and so on and so forth. But your physical body is actually made of energy. And the reason that becomes so important for us to understand is that when you have something that is made of energy, it's much easier to conceptualize that it can change than if it's made of something solid and physical and stuck. It would be much easier to make a glass of water change shape than a piece of granite, for example. So the more liquid in nature we make something, the easier it is to transform. And when you start to understand your physical body is really energy, it opens a doorway of consciousness. You actually begin to realize things can change in a way I didn't know they could. And when you do that, you open yourself to the possibility of things changing in a way that you would never imagined was possible. And so this is why healing is contingent upon this understanding when we enter into the realm of energy and consciousness processes. So quantum physics comes into the equation, and basically it says underneath the level of the atom, there's a whole other world. And it's a world you don't see because your physical senses are limited to the sensory apparatus that you have. So for example, if I'm speaking, you can hear me with your ear. If I blow a dog whistle, you're not going to hear the whistle. And it's because your ear can't register a sound of that frequency. So there's a whole world of energy that exists at the margin or outside of our range of perception. And so I know many of you see energy, you feel energy, you have all kinds of experience, so that's not a shocking detail. But for the average person to realize there's a whole world of energy that exists in the unseen space is a strange concept at first. And so in that unseen world, there are many things that exist. It's not just energy, it's elements of consciousness. And what quantum physics has started to explain to us is that what shows up in the material world is contingent upon consciousness. In other words, consciousness has to be applied for things to come into form. Now, that's not a strange concept if you break it down. You can say, oh, I would like a cup of coffee. And then the thought turns into an emotion, and you say, well, let's get busy, and you're up and out the door, and you go to the cafe, and you buy the coffee, and the next thing you're holding it in your hand. So you've transformed a thought and implied an intention through consciousness to make it happen, and you brought that experience into form. Do you see how that happens? So it happens on large and small scales, and it happens in a realm that we don't always understand, because many of the things that exist in our lives are not intended from the level of our human expression. They come from the level of our spiritual expression. And our souls are much bolder and wilder and open to adventure and crazy things than we sometimes are as human beings, because we're afraid of things. But the soul is kind of fearless, and it will actually create things that seem scary to us as a human being sometimes, but it will push us to the margins of our acceptability because it wants us to evolve as a galactic being. Now, that's a big sentence, so we're going to go through that in bits and pieces. It's simple to understand how energy is held into form if you think of a magnet. If I had a metal magnet in my hand and showed you the magnet, you'd say, I see a structure. But if I were to tell you it has an electromagnetic field around it, you would say, well, I don't see that field. And that's because our eyes are not designed to see electromagnetic fields normally, unless you have clear vision. But if I put a sheet of paper down on top of the magnet and sprinkled iron filings on it, you would see this beautiful field of energy that forms. And so inside your physical body is a field of energy termed the etheric body. And it looks like your physical body, but it's made entirely of etheric energy. And so we have an energy field that most people don't see, but many of you do see or have seen. So just a show of hands, how many people have seen energy? So just look around and realize that more than 50% of the people in the room have seen energy. And I always joke and I say, imagine if I asked that question in 1952. The ambulances would be lined up outside, take us all away. So
we can manifest them away.
we'll manifest them away. Good idea. So we have a physical body, we have an etheric body. We also, as human beings, have thoughts and feelings. And to have this level of human experience, we actually have other energy bodies. We have an emotional body. We have a mental, energetic, structured body. And these bodies exist in what you might call an alternate space or dimension. They're just a little bit outside the realm of normal perceptions. But they're part of you. They're so integrally part of you. And we can all relate to this. We've all felt happy. We've all felt sad. We've all had these emotional experiences. Science today tends to attribute a lot of these qualities to the brain. But the brain, we'll come to understand, is really an interface. It's a place where energy interfaces with the body. And things don't originate in the brain. It's a transducer of information that comes from a field much larger than the brain itself. Okay? So these are just depictions of an etheric, an emotional body, a mental body, and here's a physical body. And when you put them all together, you have this radiant energy field that becomes part of our physical presence. So we term this the aura. And people will sometimes say, well, what color is your aura? And I'll say, well, let me give you happy. Let me give you sad. The aura will change, the radiation of energy will change depending on the experience that I'm living. And if I'm grieving the loss of someone who's really dear to me, my energy is going to look very different than if I'm experiencing the birth of a first child. Can you see the difference? Both of those states are so human and so natural, and there's nothing to be judged about one state versus the other. They're natural expressions of a state at a moment in time. Okay? Now, The chakras are also part of the energy system. So the chakras can be thought of as portals between all of these bodies. It's a Sanskrit word that means wheel of light. They're not physical structures. You're not going to dissect a human body and find the chakra. It doesn't exist in a 3D or physical way. But it does interface with the body in ways that we can perceive. Have you ever had butterflies in your stomach when you're nervous or excited about something? You're actually registering your third chakra when you do that. It's your chakra that's all titillated. It's busy and moving, and you feel it in your physical body. Or you experience something that you love and you feel blissful about, and you feel the expansion in your heart chakra and how it expands and encompasses that experience. Through the chakras, energy can be exchanged. It can be transduced. Thoughts can go to feelings. Feelings can turn thoughts. We can also have relationships between our energy fields through our chakra system. And we are connected to the earth through the centers of energy that are within the chakra system of the body. And we're connected to the stars. And so we can receive energies from the earth. We can give energies to the earth. We can receive galactic energies through our higher energy centers, and we can send messages through our energy system. And the bigger and more expanded and more integrated and more ascended our energy system becomes, the more powerful those things can take place. Does everybody follow? Okay, good. So our human life can be understood to be a reflection of the state of energy. So for example, if I'm posturing my energy field as a victim, and I go out into the world holding myself that way, you can see how I'm sending out a vibe. And the world says, oh, this person over here wants to be a victim. So it responds to the energy by giving what the person is holding in consciousness. Now that's a terribly scary thing to realize, because we say, does that mean I'm responsible for every bad thing that happens to me in my life? It's a much bigger dynamic than that. And as a human being, so for example, do I ever meet someone who gets angry at me? Yes, of course I do. Does that mean I'm inviting or drawing that anger into my life? Not necessarily. It may be entirely about the person I'm interfacing with. But how I respond to that energy will be a direct observation of my own energy system. Does that make sense to everybody? So it's we could spend a whole day talking about nothing but that, but we're going to skip over it kind of quickly for now. What becomes really important to understand is that in addition to what you know yourself to be and the life you know yourself to have created, you are also in direct communication with a spiritual aspect of you, which we can call by many names, our higher self, our soul, our galactic self, however we want to term it. We are, each one of us, in direct communion with this higher self being. And the higher self part of us is much more wise, all-knowing, and powerful than we see ourselves to be as human beings, until we build the bridge of communication and understand that higher self being is not separate from us. It is actually us. And you start to realize you're not a human being looking for the divine. You're actually a divine being that has chosen to be born. And so you are a soul in a body. And that's not the way we're normally taught as human beings. But it reverses thinking so profoundly when you start to cognize that, because you understand you're in communication with an element of consciousness that can change anything about your life that doesn't match the majesty of your divine presence. Powerful words, isn't it? But it's true. Every human being sitting in a chair in this room or listening from at home is a spiritual being. There are no exceptions to that rule. You can name me any name you want to. I won't name any on stage. You can name me the name of any person you think can't be a spiritual being, and I'll say you're wrong. Everybody is a soul. You can't be here and not be a spiritual being. Now, what you do with that life and what you do with that opportunity is up to you. You see the difference? But you, as a spiritual being, can bring into your world, you can bring into your reality any kind of change or improvement that would match what your soul is capable of. And you understand your soul is capable of things far greater than we ever really were taught or knew before now. Now, I'm just going to introduce sacred geometry briefly. I think we're getting a beautiful presentation on this tomorrow. But for now, I'm just going to introduce it because we're going to talk in a few minutes about a light template. And to understand the light template, you have to understand the essence of sacred geometry. You don't have to become an expert in sacred geometry. You have to understand the principle. Because what sacred geometry is, it's the study of the geometrical order that exists in life forms. And it is actually the underlying fabric of patterns and energy that make possible the development of form life. So you remember in our magnet, how the magnet had a field that held in place the structure of the electromagnetic force that is the magnet. Sacred geometry can be thought of as all the geometrical patterns that energy can flow through to turn into physical things. So it's actually the underlying geometry of order. It's the light inside form that allows the development of form in the external world. Does everybody follow that as a concept? So these patterns show up everywhere. For example, we can see the golden mean spiral in the radiation and the development of seeds in the sunflower. We can see the sacred geometrical shapes in crystals and in all the natural forces of crystals that develop on the planet. We can see in the human body this ratio, this phi ratio, shows up everywhere in the body. For example, here's an X-ray of a hand showing here we have a metacarpal and then the 3 phalanxes of the finger. And each one of these bones is a phi ratio to the bone beside it. It's exactly 1.6 in ratio to the bone beside it. And so we start to understand there's something about the structure, the creation of the universe that is templated by sacred geometrical forces or structures. So again, a whole field of discussion, but I just want to introduce that briefly because it helps us understand the quantum order of life. There are forces and energies that exist within us that can then structure or change how things manifest in the physical world. Cymatics really brings this home because what cymatics is the study of sound science and how it affects matter. And the way cymatics is done is if you have a template, a plate that has a medium on it, like water or sand, that can move, and you put sound through the cymatic plate, you create standing waveforms, and the matter will move and shift and take the shape of what the standing waveforms look like. So we'll see these beautiful geometries that get created on these plates as we play music or put sound through the actual cymatic plate. Now this has been understood in ancient science because there's a whole system of mantra that has been taught and showed how sound can be used to invoke healing order into physical matter. I'll never forget the first time I went to a Buddhist healing ceremony. And I sat down, and the monks came in, and they bowed, and they started to play their instruments. And the sounds that started to come out at first were like, and I was so sensitive to it, I thought, I'm going to have to get up and leave. Like, I can't even sit here, it's so screechy. And then all of a sudden, the sound evolved. And then it started to turn into these beautiful melodic patterns that began to create a sense of harmony in the body. And I realized what they're doing as they do that is there's a decrystallization and then a restructuring that takes place through the energetic transformation. So again, it's just a little illustration to show how sound can be used for healing as well. But cymatics can be based on sound or consciousness. If I hold a thought in form in my head, I begin to energize that thought form. And that becomes like a sound. It becomes a sound I'm making. And if we understand that, we can see how the way we think repetitively, or if we hold a thought of manifestation powerfully in our consciousness, we're holding the vibration of that thought form and allowing it to materialize into form. Does everybody follow that? So it becomes important because when we go into the unity field healing work that we're going to talk about in a moment, we are going to use consciousness in the third session. We're bringing in intentions that we want to invoke healing around. And it just opens our mind to understand how these forces can be used in a healing way. The Sri Yantra, this pattern here, is the pattern that is produced cymatically from the sound of Om. So when we sound Om and we create a field of Om, the energy that gets patterned by that Om, all the tones and overtones of everybody chanting and Oming, creates a field of energy that orders itself like this. And I'm going to talk in a few minutes about a pattern I was shown to represent the higher self nature in our DNA. And it's a reflection of this pattern in a quantum golden light. This is the pattern that sets creation. And so we say in spiritual expression, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was made form or flesh. The Word is Om. So when the universe is Om'd, it creates a field, if you will, for the potential for galactic life to exist and be born. And every human being is like a little fractal of that Om pattern. So we can use this primordial sound in a healing way. So that's why it's so powerful when we do that collectively in chanting. Now, because there's an internal energy to everything we see, we can look at the human body and see this shows up over and over in all kinds of ways. So here we have a little circle of Vesica Pisces, a seed of life, a flower of life. And what do we have over here? Does anybody recognize this? Can you see the mirroring between those two patterns? So even from the very beginning of our own life as human beings, we are following this sacred geometrical development. And we're going to come to understand that when we get to this part in the human development, all of the cells from this point forward start to specialize. And as they specialize in one area, they lose other capabilities. So you can, for example, turn into muscle cell, but if you're going to be muscle, then you're not bone. This cell has all kinds of potential because it can become any of those things. And the energy or the memory of that potential is part of every single cell in your body. So if we can find ways to access this energy, this memory, this internal knowing, we can sound it into being. So it ties into what we're going to do when we talk about unity field healing. Now, none of this would make any sense if we didn't start talking about the ascension. So the ascension is really a process that's happening right now on the planet, as you guys all know. And it's happening at many, many levels. It's happening to the Earth. It's also happening to us. But it's actually part of a much bigger process. It's a galactic scope of process. The Earth was poised to enter into an energy space, the photon belt, where the energy that would begin to be delivered to the Earth would be accelerated in a profound way. The Earth goes through cycles, and these cycles are measured not in calendar terms like weeks and hours and days, but in galactic terms of big, vast spans of time. And so at this point in time, December of 2012, it marks the end of a very big cycle of time that we talk about through the precession of the equinoxes. And so here is the Earth pictured here, and we can see there's a pole on the Earth. And over the span of many, 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 many years, the Earth is rotating so that its north axis is pointing to different elements of the cosmic sky. And the north orientation will shift. And as it shifts, the north is pointing towards different constellations. So we've all heard the term the age of Aquarius. We're entering into the age of Aquarius. And so it means that the Earth's orientation is aligned to Aquarius at that moment in the cycle. For the Earth to pass into and out of a constellation takes about 2,000 years. But to go through the whole 360-degree arc takes 26,000 years. And what happens at that point is the Earth's north axis is then oriented to the galactic center. And so when we get there, it's the end of a cycle. Okay, did everybody follow? So December 12, 2012 was one of these moments of the ending of a cycle. But we're talking galactic time. So 5 years is the twinkling of an eye. You understand, it's a much different time frame. So we go through this ascension process right now over the span of decades. And in that period, we are entering a new cycle and leaving an old cycle behind. Well, guess what? Change is not easy. So the Earth is going through this ascension process, and we're going from one kind of a human civilization into a new kind of a human civilization. And that sounds lofty as an expression of thought, but it's the truth. Because humans are actually evolving into what we will term an ascended civilization. And an ascended civilization is one that's aware of its divine origins and the nature of all the things we're talking about in energetic terms. So the things that we're discovering and bringing into being through discussions and workshops and all these kinds of things will one day be such a natural part of human nature that it won't even be mysterious. But you're part of a wave that's at the forefront of this change if you're interested in these things already at this time. Because it will take a period of time. James often speaks of the year 2038 as being a very important year, and it is. At that point in time, we will really have anchored into a place where peace is foundationally present on the planet. It isn't right now, but it will be by 2038. Maybe even a little sooner if we can get it together sooner. But who knows? 2038 is kind of when that is prophesized to be. And peace marks the beginning of this new order. Because when we get to that place of peace and a little bit expanded consciousness from the energy of the old, we're not going to use the knowledge and intelligence we have as human beings to do the same things we do now collectively. War will seem so silly in an ascended state of consciousness. You just realize it's just the same story told over and over in a million different ways. Okay? So the reason this time is so important on the planet is because it was a make or break cycle. In other words, if humanity wasn't ready to make this shift, measured at a time date called the harmonic convergence in 1987, what would have had to happen is humanity would have had to go into a decline, a fall of civilization. But this was a really important one because where the Earth is moving in the galactic space, if we didn't make it, we wouldn't have. It would actually have been the end of the Earth as a potential civilization. That's how important this is. So leading up to 1987, Spirit pulled out all its forces. It sent the hippies, and it spread love everywhere. And it did all kinds of things to amp up the energy enough. Then it sent the rockers to put out vibrations to break down old systems of energy so something new could start to develop. You understand? It's all part of a much bigger process. And in it, by 1987, when the measurement of spiritual maturity of humanity, in other words, how loving are these guys right now? Is it 100%, 50%, 20%, 2%? Where do they fall on that potential spectrum? Is there enough love on this planet to allow it to go rapidly into an ascension? That's the question that's marked by the harmonic convergence. And the answer to it was yes. I remember as a little boy, I was 7 years old, and I was with my friend, and we were looking at a book called The Encyclopedia of the Future. And in it, there were pictures of like the Jetsons, you know, future star cities and people going around in their personal flying crafts and all this kind of stuff. And my friend's mother said to me, "John, what do you think the future will be?" And this force came over me, like this big energy overlay came, boom, and I stood up like I was the emperor, and I said, "There are two possible futures for this planet. And she said, oh, really? I said, yes. And I said, and if we're alive in 1998, we've made the good choice. And so even as a kid, that awareness was there. Okay? And I know it was in each and every one of you too, whether you're consciously aware of it or not. When we were born, the future of the Earth wasn't actually predestined. We were at a fork point, and we didn't know if the Earth was going to make it or go through a nuclear cataclysm. And so we've entered into this ascension. And what happens when you do that is there's an energetic response. And the Earth had to be prepared energetically to begin to receive the energy that was going to be coming through the sun and the whole system of suns to the Earth that's going to bring our vibration up to a place where we move into an ascension status. Does everybody follow? So the Earth's electromagnetic grid had to be restructured. And so there was a whole period between 1987 and 2012, and Lee Carroll, who channels Cryon, talked a lot about this because Cryon identified himself as an angel, an archangel, or an angelic force, who was part of the team that would restructure the electromagnetic grid of the planet to begin to prepare it to step into the ascension space. And the electromagnetic grid changes were completed in 2012. And this just postured the Earth. It didn't actually, it's not the ascension, it's just getting the Earth ready for it. Because the energy would be overwhelming if the Earth wasn't prepared to receive it. It would be like trying to pour 100 gallons of energy into a 1-cup measure. It wouldn't have been able to take it. It would have been overwhelming. So the Earth had to be regridded or structured in a way to let it receive. Now, the crystalline grid is another part of the Earth. And in 2016, there was a gathering here that celebrated the awakening of the node of Arkansas. And in Cryon's work, he talks about 12 pairs of nodes and nulls. And this area is one of the nodes. And I was at this event, and what I was told when I came to this event was you can think of this event and this time on the planet as the awakening of the Diamond Mother template. And I thought that was a really beautiful statement, but I thought, what does that really mean? And what I was told is it's the crystalline grid that's forming that will serve as the foundation that will hold the new development. And through this grid, the energy that will feed into all of these things that will be developed will be delivered the way a mother nurtures and feeds a child. So it was a beautiful metaphor, but it explained the essence of the energetic integration that was taking place at that time. And so since then, there are other grids that are part of the fabric of the Earth that are also changing. And the Gaia grid we can think of as nature herself. It's the energy of all the elementals and all the beings of life that are part of Earth's structure, and they're waking up and they're having a transformation. And humanity is coming back into relationship with this grid in a very conscious way, the way the indigenous people have always held her. Because you understand that everything that's structured on the Earth is made up of 4 forces: earth, fire, air, and water. And the ether is the mysterious element behind the scene that holds it all together. If you're going to change the Earth, do you think you might be using the 4 elements? Probably. If you're going to heal in your body, do you think you might be working with the 4 elements? Just a little bit. Of course we are. So this knowledge, this understanding is really starting to wake up in humanity. And so with that, it brings us up to this. Now, how are human beings experiencing the ascension? We've talked about the Earth and all her grids and all the changes that are taking place, but how are you living the ascension? The way a human being accesses the ascension is through our DNA. Remember when we showed the cell at the beginning, there was one cell at the very beginning. Every cell in your body today can be traced back to one cell. That little cell that formed when your mother and father, or the test tube, however you came into being, The egg and the sperm that came together to make your body, that cell contains the same genetic material that every cell in your body sitting in the chair today contains. So every piece of you started as that one little cell in time. Now, when you grasp that, you realize that little cell knows how to turn into all kinds of other cells, and it gets to a place where the cells can start specializing and turning into your human body. It can make bones, it can make muscles, it can make nerves, it can make all these things. But everything that happens to do that was potentially there at the beginning. That little cell knew how to do all of that. Now, how is that possible? How could that one little cell know how to make everything that's going to become who you are today, with all of your capacities, all of your abilities, all of your intelligence, all of the emotions you feel, all of it was contained in that little cell in potential. So do you realize how magical that is? How truly, truly mystical that is when you stop and you think about it? It's because part of that cell is a quantum field of energy that contains information. So the cell doesn't exist by itself. It's encased, if you will, by a field of energy that contains all kinds of information. Part of it is the instructions, if you will, that know how to build a body out of that little cell. Do you follow me? It contains many other things, however. In this field of information, it is also the field through which we access our spiritual origins. And this is where it gets really spooky, or woo-woo, as people like to say. It's because the access to the divinity in us is through the field of information that's part of our DNA structure. And that's a really mind-blowing concept for a scientist. It means inside your DNA is access to the God from which you have come. Okay, that's how powerful that realization really is. Now, the way that I was shown this is our DNA is going through an upshift as we go through this ascension journey. And people have all kinds of different ways of formatting that in terms of a thought process or a way of thinking. But what's happening is when you were born into this lifetime, in order to be born, you had to limit yourself from your soul's wisdom and knowledge in such a profound way that when we come here, we forget that that's where we came from. That's how smart this little system is. And so when you're born as a human being, you forget the rest of you. You forget the other lifetimes you've lived. You forget the source from which you've come. You forget the energy of all these things. You forget why you picked your spouse, and you forget why you have trouble with your children, and you forget all these things that are part of being a human being. Because it's a setup, it's a design. As we go through this ascension journey, what's happening is you're beginning to access and remember your multi-dimensional nature. You're beginning to understand that you come from a galactic space, that you are a spiritual being who has been born, and you've had other lifetimes. How many people know they've had other lifetimes? Just put your hand up. Look around again. It's amazing. So again, 1952, how many hands would go up? One person this high, you know? And it's just evidence. It shows us things are changing, and it's changing because of this ascension process. So those memories of our other lifetimes are stored somewhere. They're in our Akashic memory. And where is your Akash? Any guesses? It's in your DNA. It's in the helix of your DNA. That's where we go for these memories. Now, this little cell has made all these cells we've talked about. And this is a message that was given from Cryon in Ottawa of this year. And I'll share a little bit about this. I'm the host for Lee to come to Ottawa in Canada. And at the seminar this summer when he presented, the Saturday evening channel that he delivered to the 300 people that were there ended up being a personal channel to me. And in it, he said, the visions you're receiving that are guiding this work are precise. And he said, there are things that have not yet been seen on the planet, so you're delivering this information for the first time, which was a really big cloak of responsibility that comes upon you when you hear a phrase like that. But I accept it with my heart because I realize it's time for us to know these things. And what he said was, all of your cells can communicate instantly together. You are one being, and consciousness is part of that DNA. And if your consciousness can trigger transformation through your DNA system, guess what happens in your body? You heal. You heal things that seem impossible to heal. And so what he said was, you get genetics from your mom and your dad. You're a little hybrid from the genes that they contain. But outside of this, there's a whole field of information that's part of your DNA that comes from another place. It doesn't come from your parents. It comes from a spiritual dimension. And so this DNA, as it goes through a recalibration, is changing. And I just want to show you a few elements from a vision that I had that explains very well how this really happens. In this vision, I was shown what happens when we are planning an incarnation. In other words, you're not born on the planet, you're in spirit. You're going to come down for your next lifetime. What goes down? So your soul, in essence, what I was shown, will come in consciousness to the planet in a space of energy or multidimensional energy to feel the planet. And you will feel where you are going to orient your incarnation. In other words, you'll pick your parents. You'll pick the country you're going to be born in. You'll pick all the elements that are a specific setup for you to manifest the potential for which you are planning to be born. And so when we look at our families, sometimes we say, well, I got that one wrong. But you didn't. Because you've picked exact, like so precisely, like with unbelievable quantum precision, you have picked the exact place where you were to be born to manifest your soul's potential or purpose. And so maybe part of it was to heal in a family lineage or so on. Like we won't go into this too deeply, but you see that you'll pick a place that's destined to your soul's purpose. And so when we were born, we would go to the earth, we'd feel it out, we'd figure out where we're going, and then we would go back into consciousness space. And what I was shown in the vision was we can envision this like we go to this courtyard. And so in this space, it's like we're hovering there, and this little pyramid kind of descended in the middle of the courtyard that looked like a double octahedron, and it was made of light. And it sat in the middle of the courtyard, just sitting there on a golden chain, like a pendulum. And all of a sudden, I realized there were doors, but this was such a quantum space that if I turned right, the doors grew. So if there was 3, but when I turned my head, there's now 20. Or if I looked up, there was 3, I looked up, there's now 20. So I realized there was kind of an infinity to this space that you couldn't really define. But I knew if I went into a doorway, what do you think would have happened? I would have gone into a lifetime. So behind the door, behind the frame of that door would be an incarnation. But I wasn't meant to go through the door. What I was told was stay where you are because you're assembling your next incarnation. And what started to happen was energy started to come out of the doors. And a little red here, and a little blue here, and another color here, and it kept flowing into the pyramid, adding energy to that pyramidal structure. And it kept growing and growing until all of a sudden it was like it was cooked, and it stopped. And then this whole journey took place in the context of a guided regression I was doing with a gentleman. And so he said to me, well, what's the next important thing in your journey? And what happened was I shot through like hyperspace, like on Star Trek, you go through the star field and it's like, whoosh, and all the stars go flying by. And I landed in a quartz crystal. And the quartz crystal was positioned in such a way that it was embedded in granite and what I recognized to be the earth. And so the energy that had been assembled for this incarnation was sent down, and it was like it merged with the quartz crystal on the planet. And so Cryon said to us in a channel years ago There's a place on the earth called the Cave of Creation. And in that cave, there is a crystal that is that belongs, so to speak, to each individual soul who has, is, or will be incarnated on the planet. So every soul who comes here has their own little quartz crystal. And so I was just passing through mine. And when you were born, you, of course, passed through yours. We all have this. And the next thing that happened was I was shown that same structure merging with a fetus. So you can see from the structure of the vision how the soul put together the energy that would be my soul, and it came and merged with a developing baby who I had picked on my journey when I first came down to the earth. Do you see? So the little baby, the genetics in the baby came from the mother and the father. But the energy of the soul came from a third place. There's a triad in every human development. And what I was shown next is that through this connection, there is something that I've learned to term the 24th chromosome. You know how we have 23 pairs of chromosomes in our body? But the second chromosome is being recognized as a fused chromosome. It's actually two that have become one. That happened when the Pleiadian star mothers came, and I'll go into this a little bit later. It's when the civilization of humanity was first seeded, its divine connection. And this chromosome is the 24th chromosome. It's the energy of your soul. And this doesn't exist in a physical way, it exists in a quantum space. But this DNA is with you every time you incarnate. The rest of your DNA changes depending on the parents to whom you're born. Do you follow? Does everybody follow? Did I lose anybody? In this DNA, you have the memory of all your other lifetimes, as well as many other things. And the way I was shown this molecule, it was like this big galactic-sized DNA strand. And in it, there was one human form that was luminous. It was like it was all lit up. And at every twist of the spiral, there was another form. But remember before digital photography when there were negatives? And you would expose the negative and it would turn into a picture, but it looked like a nothing, like a space. These were like negatives. It was like the other lifetimes there, but invisible. They were hiding, if you will, in the Akashic memory of the DNA space. And so the next thing I was shown in this vision was a crystalline staircase. And the staircase came, and I went in intention to go up the stairs. I kind of wanted to see what was on the other side of the door. But I wasn't allowed to. It was like there was a glass barrier that I ran into in the vision, and I ricocheted so hard that I was sitting in a chair. I almost tipped backwards into the person behind me, and they had to push me back up in my chair again. And so it disappeared and came back in my third eye, and when it came back, it had a strand of DNA on it. And it was telling me that the way you go from where you are to where you're going is through your DNA axis. Okay? So you can kind of see how every little bit and piece is being answered by an element of what's contained in the picture. The next thing I was shown was this little pyramid being reactivated from that spiritual space. And so remember, this little pyramid is with you. It's like your soul's pyramid that's part of your energy structure in your body as you sit there today. This connection that we have to that multidimensional space is being activated and recalibrated. And new energy and new information is coming into your soul's design from your spiritual self. Do you see how that happens? So this is kind of a picture that explains what's happening during the human part of the ascension, through our ascension. Now, there are two ways we can ascend. We can live here and live this out. We go through it in vivo. We go through this process while we live in our body. And that's who you are, or you wouldn't be interested in any of this. The other thing is, when the time comes for each of us to pass away, when we come back the next time, we're going to be completely wired up to the energy of the new. And so it's a quick way to also go through many elemental changes. And so What you achieve in your lifetime now, in this time of ascension, when you're born again, everything you've done in this lifetime will be immediately with you in your next birth. So people will sometimes say, well, I'm 85 years old. What's the point of ascending now? And I'll say, because you're actually doing this for your next incarnation. When you come back the next time, you're going to be so wired up to step into the new that you will walk right into that. Do you see how that unfolds? So it's very powerful what's happening. As we work with energy and forces of consciousness of this nature, I always explain the principle, the difference between yoga and yoga. I could decide I'm going down to the yoga studio and I'm going to flail my arms around a little bit and say, oh, great yoga session. Then I'll do a little dead man's pose and say that was great. And it was really a physical exercise. It's like doing a bike ride or doing something very, very physical. Or I can go into communion with my divine origins. And I can ask that energy field to come into the space and into my body. And I can say, be with me while I move around and reweave me.
And it does include the breath.
Pardon me?
And it does include the breath.
Passing through the breath.
Yeah.
Through the breath, yes. So your breath is a tool for bringing that energy in, absolutely right. So you're bringing that energy into your body and you're healing as you do your exercise. Do you see the difference between the two? So when we work energetically, we are doing this. We're bringing a whole level of divine knowledge, of greater wisdom, of energetic power into the space, and we're bringing it forward as we do our healing work. So healing, in essence, is all yoga, with the big Y. Now, unity field healing is a process that I was shown to work with the quantum space of DNA. There's many of these tools now being developed. This is one I was shown and how to work with it. And it began for me many years ago when I received what I would call today a DNA activation. And I remember in this vision, it was like a little light strand, a dot of light came down, and it plugged into the top of my head, and I felt it physically in my body as it did that. And I could feel like a vibration passing down through my body, and the little strand popped open into what looked like a helix. And I thought, gosh, that looks like DNA. What's that? Now, this is before I understood any of this kind of stuff happening. And so, but it was such a strange and unusual experience that I wrote it down in a little journal that I was keeping. And I thought, this is important for some reason. But anyway, so this was back probably in the late 90s that this happened. In 2011, in this room, I underwent another experience where I was introduced to what I call the Unity Field Healing Template. And so I had gone for a little session with Max, which I encourage. And I came back into this space and I was in meditation. And what I lived was the following. I was sitting there very happy. There I am, post-Max, in my chair, minding my own business. And the top of my head opened up. And I could see the galactic sky. And in it, there was a little dot of light that came like a star, and it descended right above my head. And it sat there in what I could only say I was seeing through the top of my head. And the little dot formed a pyramid. It shot out rays of light, and it created a light crystalline structure that looked like a pyramid. And then another dot of light came down, and it shot open. Another dot of light came down and it shot open, and a whole series of pyramids formed in this way. And then down through the whole structure came another dot of light that instead of turning into, and then inside the circle, 2 more circles formed. And then inside that, 2 more circles formed. And then light started to flush from the structure. It was like it was coming out of the interior of the structure. And as it did, everything started to spin. And what ended up happening is wherever there was a circle, the light was going so fast that it looked like it was going forwards and backwards at the same time. You know, like when you watch a car wheel and it goes fast, fast, faster, and then all of a sudden it oversamples and it looks like it's spinning backwards. The light was going so fast through the structure that it was moving forwards and backwards at the same time. And it ended up creating a light form yin and yang. Everywhere there was a circle. And then it turned into 3D, into a sphere. And the light was moving in the same way. And then that was the end of the vision. A few weeks later, I was on the internet looking something up. And this picture, I wasn't looking at crop circles, this picture popped up on the screen. And I looked at it and thought, that's exactly what I saw the other day. And I knew that somehow this was a sacred geometrical pattern. It was a light form that I was being shown. But I still had no idea what it meant. I went to Egypt with James and the Earthkeeper gang and came back a little different. And I was doing a yoga session, no kidding, in my own home. And at the end of it, I was doing the dead man's pose. I was laying there several months later. And all of a sudden, that light pattern came back into my mind's eye very prominently. And it activated again. But this time when it activated, it started to emit energy. It was like there were all kinds of beautiful crystalline energy that was shining out through the structure. And on the mat, I felt like a marionette. I was lying on the mat and my hand would flick and my foot would flick and I would go through all these little gestures and motions. And I realized as the pattern was activated, it was activating me. And so it was working through my DNA structure to recalibrate my energy system. And at that point, I thought it was a gift. I thought, this is personal. This is something I'm just being shown or given for some reason. I had no idea it was part of a healing system. And so back here in this room again in 2012, for the 12-12-12 event, I had this unbelievable experience. And what happened in this event was I went through into meditation, and again, the top of my head opened. I could see the galactic sky, and it was like I could see all the way back to the center of the galaxy. And I'm sitting there seeing the center of the galaxy while I'm sitting here in my human body. And all of a sudden, this wave of love came down. And it passed through my body, and there's tears rolling down my face because the love was so profound that I felt at that moment in time. And I knew in that instant that that's how we're loved, really. The universe, the Creator, loves us with such an intense energy and such an intense presence that when you feel it, there are no words that can convey the experience. And as I looked up, I realized the spiral of the galaxy is the helix pattern that we're so familiar with in our DNA. And that somehow this helix is the foundational structure of life, all the way from the way the galaxy is made, right down to the way our human bodies are made. It's magical. That was the point where I saw this crystalline staircase. And what happened next was I was shown that DNA molecule again that I had seen before with the little people in it. But this time, this pattern was now in it. And as the pattern moved through the DNA, it was like, you know that commercial on TV where the bubbles come out and they clean your bathroom? It was like as the bubble moved through the DNA, it was cleaning it out. It was like recalibrating or shifting the energy in the DNA structure. And it was then I recognized that this is the pattern that knows how to recalibrate the energy within the multidimensional system of the DNA. And so as I sat with all this information and experience, I realized that we can bring this pattern into the healing process and catalyze it through sessions, through energy process, to help recalibrate the energy system of the human being. And so it was that led to the development of unity field healing. And so the way that I was shown this, actually I'm just going to jump ahead for a sec, is the work was broken up into 3 sessions to be shared. There was session 1, which is called self-attunement. It's an activation of the individual's DNA axis. Session 2 is an attunement to the light pattern, the template. And then session 3 is called targeted intentional support. You work with your DNA activation and the template together to bring recalibration into your system around the intention that you're putting into the healing session. And so the work was developed, and I started to do sessions with people in a hands-on way. And I was instructed spiritually to create audios so that people could access the work no matter where they are or how they are. So I created audios, vocally recorded audios of the 3 sessions. And so you can actually do this work at home. You can have the audios and you do them in your own personal space or in your own healing space. And so, going back here just quickly, Cryon in this same message said there is a field around the DNA molecule and it contains something special, which is your higher self. It's not in the double helix, it's around it. And he said to me, he said, I will tell you one day, doctor, the field is something you will see. And the moment he was saying this in channel, this is what I was seeing in my mind's eye. So you can see within this structure, this Sri Yantra, remember the triangles we talked about? And so I saw this light as the encasement light of the DNA structure. This is the pattern, if you will, that I was shown as the higher self representation. And as we go into healing work, if we are activating the higher self element of the DNA, its energy can filter down. It can weave into the DNA quantum field and introduce change within the DNA structure. So this is when he said what I'm being shown, and the work will evolve in such a way that science, as it develops quantum sight, will see that this is the truth. But until we have quantum technology that can do that, it will only be through mystical visions that people will have this kind of information. And so this is really what we're doing as we do the unity field work. And what he told me was, the visions and teachings that lead to the development are validated as true. And he said it's the Syrian support that we're receiving in this work is legitimate. It's actually the light beings that are working with us. And he gave me my name. He said, your name, you're remembering this work from when you worked in the Temple of Rejuvenation in Lemuria. And he said, you're reading the scrolls and the visions and information are coming to you from that space. And he said, your name at that time was Ilahi when you worked there. So it was very powerful for me to receive all of that. Now, in March of this year, I was introduced to a group of light beings called the Sirian Blue White Collective. And what happened with this was the beings came to me in a meditative vision as a big cloud of light. And they created an array. And as they did, out of the light, they took form as if there were beings appearing within the cloud of light. And they all had a human shape to them and a head and a face, but you didn't have any structure on the face, no nose, no eyes or anything. They were just luminous beings. And so I tried to create a little image of the way it appeared to me when I was seeing it. And in the middle of the image, there was a DNA molecule, and like a pyramid or a table, I guess you could consider it. And they were all around the table and all around the DNA. And they gave a channel to me, and they said that we work at the level of what you call masters of light, sound, and DNA transformation. And we're here very presently in consciousness at this point in time because of what humanity is living through the ascension. We have been with humanity all through its journey through time, and we've been present in more and less conscious ways through many civilizations. Think Egypt, think Lemuria, think Atlantis. And so the Syrians are here now because we really need support and help, if you will, multidimensionally speaking, to integrate or weave in this transformation that we're taking ourselves through as we ascend on the planet. So it's like a clarion call responds to help humanity integrate the process of what it's doing. And they told me that they've been behind the unity field work from the beginning, long before they ever introduced themselves to me as the light beings who were doing it. And Cryon said, the help you are getting from the Syrians is real. These grandparents that would come in now and start to review some of the textbooks of Lemuria. You had a vision, you explained you weren't sure how it played out, but you drew it and showed it. It was figures that seemed to meet around the table. This is a metaphor for cellular coherence and the meeting of the DNA. This is part of the unity. The field around the DNA is critical. It's a multidimensional expression that is not able to be measured except in experiments that measure what DNA is doing to other things. And so what he said in this channel was that as we go through this process, healing occurs by coherence. we become coherent in the space of our being, and then we become coherent in our connection to our higher self presence, and we bring that energy into the space. To help us do that, along come the Syrians. Because what happens is they come into the sessions. When you're doing the audios or when we're doing the hands-on sessions, they come into the room. Energetically, you feel them, and many people even see them in the space helping us. And it's why I wanted to rush through all this to get to a short transmission. We're going to take just 5 minutes because we're out of time. I have 6 minutes left, so we're going to use it to do a Sirian transmission. Are you ready? So in this meditation, the way it works is I'm kind of like a CNN reporter. And I close my eyes and I start to see things, and I tell you what I'm seeing because it's what's happening energetically in the space. And so I'll report it and I'll tell you, and you can relate to it in the way that it's personal to you inside of you, okay? So just close your eyes and go inside. And immediately as this happens, I can see this really, really large blue and white pyramid forming over the room, the space, the quantum space in which we sit together. There are 2 pyramids. The lower is a standard pyramid, and then there is a sharper, higher pointed pyramid that forms above it. And between the 2 pyramids, there's an oscillation where one pyramid is activated and then the lower pyramid is being activated. And they're waving back and forth, creating a field of energy between the surface of the 2 pyramids. And as the energy builds in the pyramid space, colors start to be emitted in the space between the 2 pyramids. And a little ray of light emerges from the peak of the lower pyramid, as if a strand of light is coming down and connecting to the energy field of every single person in the room. And as you make this connection, your energy field is connected to the energy of this geometry that's forming over us in space. And I can see the light beings as if they're standing over the upper pyramid. And there's a ray of energy that emerges from the forehead of their body and from the heart of their body. And it forms 2 rays of light that go directly to the peak or the apex of the upper pyramid. And they begin to spin as if they're in a rotation or a cylinder around the pyramid. They're spinning in a circle. And as they spin, there's a spiral of energy that weaves into the apex of the pyramid. And the energy in the pyramid builds and builds, and it begins to flush down through the individual channel that each person has created in the beginning of the meditation. And through this connection, everything in your energy field that you are open to for healing or recalibration is touched by the energy that is coming down from this space. As this happens, there's a beautiful circle of light that forms like a platform underneath our physical body. And it's part of the gridding or the structure of the earth. And it begins to spin like a CD or a record underneath us. And as the energy is channeled down through your energy field, this spinning disc serves as an anchor to help you receive the energy that you're being given through this communication. And the energy builds and builds and builds. And this beautiful, beautiful field of luminous light forms in the room, and it extends far beyond the boundaries of the room, like we're sitting in a globe of light. And out of the ethers of this energy, a geometry forms that is unique to each person in the room. It's a structure of energy that forms, and it comes in front of you. And it sits at the level of your heart. And the energy moves in through your heart chakra into the center of your body. And in it contains the magic, the alchemy for your personal transformation and the next step on your path that is unique to you in the ascension journey. And just allow that energy to stabilize in your body and breathe in. Breathe in deep. Breathe in really deep into your body. And exhale. One more breath in. And exhale. And one last breath in. And exhale. Beautiful. And you can open your eyes and come back into the space. That energy pattern is going to work within your energy system over the days and weeks and months to come. You have designed it. You have drawn into your space the energy, the structure that is most suited to you in your evolution at this moment in time for the future. So just allow it to work, allow it to be. And we thank the Syrians for their support. They're serious and they're not so serious all at the same time. So I'm going to turn over these. Every time I say serious, my phone thinks it's Siri. It's activated. So we have a little table outside. If you want to come by, I have the sessions on audio. We have a little book. We have some beautiful bracelets that are created to carry the energy of this particular healing work, the Syrians. So you can stop by and talk about all that. Or if you're interested in practitioner training, just see us at the table. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Nancy.
You get more profound every year. This is beautiful.
So another incredible round of applause, please, for Dr. John, an amazing soul, doing incredible work. And I am so grateful to you, John and Michael, for the beautiful energy that you carry. You brighten every room you come into. You do want to pick up a copy of John's book outside and have a session.